My brother's old roommate tried to destroy our lives, first by secretly taking photos of me, then by using them to frame my brother for something awful. We kicked him out and reported him, and now 2 years later, he's suddenly begging me to save him from his own family. Let me start from the beginning. My older brother Caleb is my entire world. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. He's not just my brother. He's my protector, my anchor. One of my earliest memories is from when I was 6. We left the grocery store and my bike was gone. Just a snapped chain left behind. I was devastated, blaming myself. But the next morning, I woke up to a brand new bike in my room. Caleb, just 13 back then, had sold his most prized possession, his signed baseball glove, to replace it. When I tried to thank him through tears, he just hugged me and said, "That's what brothers are for." That's who he's always been. A few years later, we were driving on the highway when a truck got dangerously close. I was blasting music, living my best fake music video life in the passenger seat, and ignored Caleb's voice telling me to buckle up. Mom laughed it off, but Caleb didn't. He reached across and fastened my seatbelt for me. A few seconds later, the crash happened. 11 days after that, we were standing next to each other at our mom's funeral, still in clothes with the tags on. I was 14, he was 21, and when they tried to put me in foster care, Caleb fought like hell. He drained his savings, took parenting classes every weekend, rented a bigger place, and even broke up with his long-term girlfriend, just to prove he could raise me. It took 2 years and $12,000, but he won. And those weeks after? Peaceful. I let myself cry for the first time. No jokes, no pretending, just me and my brother, grieving in silence. Safe. That's when Craig moved in. Caleb couldn't afford the rent alone, so he let a friend from work move into the spare room. At first, Craig seemed okay. His parents paid his bills, so he was always around when I got home from school. Then one day, while I was looking at old photos of Mom and trying to hold it together, Craig came into my room and said, "You know Caleb would never say it, but you're exhausting him. Maybe stop being such a burden." His voice was flat, cold. That night, something inside me shifted. I started hiding my feelings, crying in school bathrooms instead of at home, convincing myself I was fine, faking it. And then I stopped eating. It wasn't even about weight. I just needed some way to feel in control. Some days I survived on chewing gum and ice cubes. One morning, as I dragged myself down the stairs, weak from hunger, Craig smirked and said, "Hey, you're really getting the hang of moving on. Good for you." I couldn't even respond. I was too lightheaded. That evening, Caleb came home early. I was in my room wearing shorts and a t-shirt when he barged in. His face dropped. "What the hell, Olivia?" I panicked, trying to cover myself with a blanket. "I thought you wouldn't be home yet." But he didn't yell. He just looked at me, eyes full of panic. "When's the last time you ate a real meal?" His hands were shaking. I tried to deflect. Craig said, but Caleb stopped me mid-sentence, pulled me into a hug and whispered, "You love food. Why would you do this to yourself?" I couldn't even answer. That night, around 4 a.m., I heard the front door slam. Craig was back, and Caleb was waiting. I heard the crash, something knocked over. Then Caleb's voice, sharp and unfamiliar. "You're gone tomorrow. I don't care where you go. But if you ever come near my sister again, you'll regret it." Craig didn't say a word. After he left, Caleb came upstairs, opened my door, and asked softly, "You awake?" I nodded. "I know rent's going to be harder now," I said. "Don't worry about that," he whispered. "Craig's out. You'll always come first." The next morning, someone knocked on the door. It was the police, with an anonymous tip that led to harassment charges against Craig. Turns out, he hadn't just said awful things. He'd taken secret photos too, trying to use them to hurt my brother. But Caleb's always been the one thing I could count on, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from either of us. The report said Caleb was hurting me. My heart dropped. I didn't even need to ask. I knew instantly Craig was behind it. This was revenge. And now, everything we had built together, every sacrifice, was at risk of being ripped apart in seconds. The officers asked to speak with me privately. I could see the panic in Caleb's face as I followed them down the hallway. He had spent years fighting for me, protecting me. And now one lie could undo it all. One of the officers, a woman, sat with me in my bedroom. Her voice was gentle, but her questions cut deep. Had Caleb ever laid a hand on me? Did I feel safe here? I almost laughed. Caleb is the only person who's ever made me feel safe. I told her everything. How he stepped up after we lost our mom, how he gave up his life to make sure I wasn't placed in foster care. But she looked unconvinced. She asked about my weight loss, about whether I was really okay. That's when I told her about Craig, about the way he made me feel like I was a burden, how he convinced me to stay silent and strong even when I was breaking inside. I even showed her photos from just a few months earlier, proof that my health had changed after Craig moved in. Eventually, the officers left. The woman gave me her card and said to call if I ever needed help. Caleb was sitting on the couch, head in his hands. The second the door closed, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "I thought they were going to take you," he whispered. I sat next to him and leaned on his shoulder. "I'd never let that happen," I told him. That night, we ordered pizza. Caleb watched me eat every bite of my 2 slices. It was the most food I'd had in weeks. I felt nauseous afterward, but his relieved expression made it worth it. The next morning, my phone blew up. Dozens of texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Strangers claiming to be relatives I'd never even met. Messages like, "We're concerned for your safety. Your brother isn't capable of raising you. We should have stepped in after the accident." I showed Caleb and his face turned white. "These people didn't even show up to Mom's funeral," he muttered. "Craig must have found them. This isn't just about rent anymore. He's trying to take you away from me." I blocked every number, but the damage was done. My mind started racing. Who were these people? How did Craig dig them up? And why did they suddenly care? After years of silence, the texts were full of fake concern, but underneath they felt like threats. Hints that I wasn't in a stable home, that someone needed to step in. Caleb called off work and spent the entire day talking to our caseworker, sending over the screenshots. She listened and sounded sympathetic, but also warned us that if even one of those people filed a formal complaint, it would trigger a mandatory investigation. "Just standard procedure," she said, like that was supposed to be comforting. I watched Caleb age 10 years in one afternoon. He looked exhausted. "We have to be careful," he told me at dinner. Yes, I was eating again. Slowly, carefully. But progress is progress. "Craig knows how to hit us where it hurts. He's aiming for custody." I nodded. "What if he doesn't stop?" "Then we fight," Caleb said without hesitation. "Like we always do." He reached across the table and held my hand. His grip was steady, warm. Mine was shaking. The next day at school was weird. People stared, whispered. A girl I barely knew, Mackenzie, walked up during lunch with this overly sweet voice and asked if everything was okay at home. I snapped, told her to mind her own business. Not my best moment, but I was scared. Later, my chemistry lab partner, Tyler, showed me a message he got from some concerned adult. The message claimed I was unstable and hinted that my brother was dangerous. It told students to keep an eye on me, document things. Subtle, manipulative, and terrifying. Craig had turned my school into his own personal spy network. I deleted the message from Tyler's phone and made him promise not to share it, but word was already spreading. 3 of my teachers gave me that look. The one where their smile fades and their eyes fill with quiet judgment. My English teacher, Mr. Benson, even asked me to stay after class. "If you ever need to talk," he said gently. I mumbled something and left as fast as I could. When I got home, Caleb was on the phone again, his shoulders tense, his jaw tight. This wasn't just stress, it was war. He ended the call the second he saw me walk in, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What happened now?" I asked, dropping my backpack onto the floor with a thud. "Nothing, just work stuff," he replied too quickly. But that night, I passed by his room and heard him through the door, his voice low, tense. "I've worked there for 3 years. You know I'd never do something like that." A pause. Then, "Yes, I understand. Thank you for the opportunity." When he finally came out, his eyes were red and glassy. He asked about my homework, offered to watch a movie, pretended everything was fine, but I could see how his hands shook as he poured a glass of water. "Did you lose your job?" I asked quietly. He sank into the couch like the weight of everything had just hit him. "Someone sent in an anonymous report. Said I was stealing from the register. They checked the books, everything's accounted for, but said they couldn't take the risk." I felt my face flush with anger. "It was Craig, wasn't it?" Caleb just nodded, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. "I'll figure something out," he mumbled. "Don't worry about it." But I did worry. I watched him stay up past 3 a.m. that night, updating his resume, the cold blue glow of the screen casting shadows over his exhausted face. I worried when he drove me to school the next morning without saying a word, his silence louder than anything. By the end of the week, Caleb had 2 part-time jobs, stocking shelves at night and delivering food during the day. He worked over 16 hours a day, only coming home long after midnight and leaving before I even woke up. He started leaving me quick notes on the fridge, reminders to eat, a few dollars for lunch, rushed handwriting that looked more like scribbles each time. We barely saw each other. The apartment was silent, except for the growing mess. Takeout containers stacked on the counter, laundry piling up in corners no one had time to fold. Then, on Friday, the school counselor called me in. Ms. Reynolds, new, gentle. Her office smelled like lavender and was covered in posters about embracing your potential. Someone contacted us with concerns, she said, folding her hands neatly. They mentioned your weight loss and possible signs of neglect at home. I felt like the floor tilted under me. But instead of breaking down, I breathed in and told her everything about losing our mom, Caleb's fight for custody, Craig's lies. She listened, nodding and scribbling notes. When I finished, she said, I believe you. But then she added, I'll still need to schedule a home visit. It's just procedure. How does Tuesday sound? My stomach flipped. Our place was a mess. Caleb barely had time to sleep, let alone clean. What if she misunderstood? Could we do Friday instead? I asked, forcing a polite smile. Caleb's more likely to be home then, she agreed. That weekend I cleaned like my life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. I did all the laundry, scrubbed the bathroom, wiped every dusty corner. I even made a full meal we could reheat for the visit. I arranged our bills, put out fresh flowers, and hung family photos we hadn't touched since the move. Caleb came home Sunday night and found me passed out on the couch, still holding a half-empty bottle of disinfectant. Olivia? He whispered, gently shaking me awake. I told him about the home visit. His face fell, another weight added to the pile he was already carrying. I'm so sorry, he said, voice cracking. No, I said, sitting up and rubbing my neck. This is Craig's fault, and we're going to be fine. We just need to make sure everything looks perfect. Friday came. The home visit wasn't perfect, but it went okay. Ms. Reynolds noticed how spotless everything was. Caleb had taken the afternoon off just to be there. He was kind, attentive, showed her my report cards and the fridge schedule he made for us. He even bought a fruit bowl and filled it with apples and bananas, trying to make our home look like one of those families from a magazine. She asked to speak with me privately. I told her the truth. Caleb's the best guardian I could ever have. He works so hard because he wants me to have a good life. He gave up everything for me. She nodded slowly. But I could tell. She wasn't done being worried. Her eyes scanned the room again, like she was searching for something that didn't add up. Then she asked, Has anyone unusual been contacting you lately? Any adults you don't recognize? I wanted to tell the social worker about the texts from those so-called relatives, but something stopped me. What if it just made things worse? What if it triggered that automatic investigation the caseworker warned us about? So I lied. No, I said. No one unusual has contacted me. Everything's fine. After she left, Caleb and I collapsed onto the couch, completely drained. Do you think she believed it? I asked, staring at the ceiling. I hope so, he said, running a hand through his hair. But Craig's not done. And he was right. The next day, I got called out of class during third period. My stomach dropped the second I saw Principal Donovan standing there beside a woman in a navy pantsuit. She introduced herself as a social worker. Clipboard in hand, tone all business. We've received several reports of concern, she said, her voice cold and clipped. I'd like to ask you a few questions. I kept my cool, told the truth. But the way she looked at me, it was like she'd already made up her mind. She kept circling back to my weight, to whether Caleb controlled my food, asking the same things from different angles, like she was trying to trap me into saying something that wasn't true. Every answer I gave seemed to land wrong. They called Caleb. He had to leave work in the middle of his shift. I could see the pressure building in his face during the car ride home, the way his hands clenched the wheel, white-knuckled. I can't do this anymore, he said as we pulled into the lot. Can't do what? I asked, my throat tightening. I can't keep fighting everyone. We need to end this. We need to stop Craig. That night, I made a decision. If Craig wanted to play dirty, then so could I. I was going to confront him and record everything. Get proof of what he was doing. It was risky, but I was out of options. If Caleb lost custody, I'd be sent away. Maybe to strangers, or worse, to those relatives who only started caring when it served their agenda. I found Craig's new address online. He'd moved into a flashy downtown apartment, glass, steel, luxury, probably all funded by his parents. The next day, I skipped going home after school. I rehearsed the conversation the whole bus ride. My hands were trembling when I knocked on his door. Craig opened it, shocked at first. Then that smug grin slid onto his face. "Well, well," he said, leaning in the doorway. "Shouldn't you be home waiting for your brother to feed you?" I had my phone recording in my pocket. "I know what you're doing," I told him. "The false reports. Getting Caleb fired. Reaching out to our relatives. Why?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "Your brother humiliated me. Kicked me out like I was nothing. Nobody does that to me." "So you're trying to get me taken away from him?" I asked. "That's sick." "It's called consequences," he snapped. "Your brother needs to learn." He froze mid-sentence. His eyes narrowed. "What's in your pocket?" Before I could react, he lunged forward, yanked the phone out of my hoodie. The look on his face when he saw it was recording turned to rage. He slammed it into the wall. The screen shattered on impact. "You stupid little—" he hissed through clenched teeth, grabbing my arm hard. "You think you can trap me? Get out before I call the cops and say you broke in." I ran. Tears were already blurring my vision. My arm throbbed where he'd grabbed me. I had no phone, no proof, and now, bruises I couldn't explain. At the bus stop, I borrowed a stranger's phone to call Caleb. The moment he pulled up, he jumped out and pulled me into a hug. His face went pale when he saw the bruises. "I should have protected you," he whispered. On the drive home, the silence was heavy until Caleb finally spoke. "We need help," he said. "We can't keep doing this alone." That's when I had an idea. "What about Jenna?" I asked. Caleb's ex, the one he'd broken up with to protect our custody case. They were so in love, and she had been kind, smart, and warm. Most importantly, Craig didn't know her. "I can't ask her," Caleb said, shaking his head. "Not after everything." "Then let me," I said. "The worst she can do is say no." I found her Instagram and messaged her from a new account I made at the library. I didn't expect anything, but she answered. Almost immediately. Jenna responded almost instantly and agreed to meet me the next day at a local coffee shop. I barely slept that night, worried she'd change her mind. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. Her hair was shorter now, styled into a sharp bob, and she carried herself with more confidence than I remembered. But her smile, that same warm, familiar smile, lit up her entire face when she saw me. "Olivia," she said, pulling me into a hug. "You've grown so much!" I didn't hold anything back. I told her everything. Craig's manipulation, the custody threats, Caleb working himself to exhaustion. Her expression darkened with every word. When I showed her the bruises on my arm, she flinched. "That guy is unbelievable," she muttered. "Of course I'll help. Just tell me what you need." The plan was risky, but simple. Jenna would approach Craig at one of his regular hangouts, pretend to be interested, get him talking, and record everything on her phone. "He knows I tried to record him once," I explained. "He won't suspect you." Jenna nodded, her eyes sharp. "Guys like him? I can handle it." The next night, she went through with it. I was a mess, pacing the apartment, checking my phone every 5 seconds. Caleb kept watching me with a mix of concern and doubt. He still wasn't sure about involving Jenna, but at this point, we were out of options. Just after midnight, she texted, "Got it. Meeting you tomorrow." The following day, we met in a quiet park. Jenna looked exhausted but proud. She handed me her phone, her lipstick smudged and a faint trace of Craig's cologne still clinging to her wrist. "Listen to this," she said. She pressed play, and Craig's voice came through, clear and unmistakable. "Yeah, I've been messing with that guy who kicked me out. Called in tips, reached out to his family, got him fired. Best part, I'm going after his custody next. Once the sister's gone, he's got nothing left." Jenna's voice on the recording was calm. "Isn't that a bit extreme?" Craig laughed. "He deserves it. The kid doesn't matter, just collateral." I felt sick hearing it. Caleb looked like he could finally exhale. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is what we needed." But instead of going straight to Craig, Caleb had a better idea. He called Craig's parents. Craig had always bragged about how they paid for everything. His rent, his car, his lifestyle. They were the type of people who cared deeply about appearances, the kind who donated to charities just to get their names on plaques. Caleb arranged a meeting with them at their country club. He wore the one nice outfit he owned, and I borrowed a dress from a friend. Jenna drove us, squeezing Caleb's hand before we got out. The place was intimidating. Marble floors, quiet halls. But we walked in with purpose. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson were exactly as I imagined. Elegant, distant, and visibly annoyed that we'd taken up their time. They sat stiffly, barely sipping their drinks. Caleb didn't waste a second. "I'll be brief," he said, voice steady. "Your son has been trying to ruin my life and take my sister away." Mrs. Patterson raised an eyebrow. "That's quite the accusation." "It is," Caleb agreed, "which is why I brought proof." He played the recording. The air at the table shifted as Craig's voice spilled out. Their expressions went from dismissive to stunned. By the end, Mrs. Patterson had her hand over her mouth. Mr. Patterson looked furious. "We had no idea," she whispered. "We knew Craig could be difficult, but this?" "He used your support to do all this," Caleb said. "I'm not asking for anything. I just want it to stop." Mr. Patterson nodded grimly. "It will. I give you my word." 2 days later, Craig called Caleb in a fury. His parents had completely cut him off. No more apartment, no more allowance, nothing. He screamed into the phone, threatening revenge, but his words felt empty now. Just like that, the calls to the school stopped. The relatives who had suddenly appeared went silent. Even Caleb's old boss reached out and offered him his job back. Apparently, Mr. Patterson had made a few calls of his own. It wasn't a total fix. We still had bills. The caseworker still checked in. But the fear, that constant, suffocating fear, was gone. For the first time in months, I could breathe. About a week later, there was a knock at the door. Jenna stood there with a bag of Thai takeout, the scent drifting through the apartment like comfort itself. "Thought you two might be hungry," she said with a small smile. Caleb hesitated, just for a second, before letting her in. We all sat around our little kitchen table eating quietly. I watched them steal glances when they thought the other wasn't looking. The tension between them was charged, but not bitter, more like a flicker of something not quite gone. "You should stay for a movie," I said casually as we cleared the table. Jenna looked at Caleb. He smiled. "I'd like that." They settled onto the couch, leaving a careful space between them. But by the end of the movie, that space had disappeared. Their hands found each other in the quiet. I watched from the hallway, smiling to myself as I closed my bedroom door. We weren't totally okay yet, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were going to be. Things still weren't perfect, but we were getting there. After everything Caleb had given up for me, maybe now it was time for him to get something back. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. Caleb was in the kitchen, humming to himself as he flipped one onto a plate. Jenna stood nearby, casually setting the table, wearing one of his old t-shirts like she belonged there. "Morning, sleepyhead," she greeted with a grin. "Starving," I mumbled, taking my seat. Caleb slid a plate in front of me, and that's when I saw it. Something I hadn't noticed in what felt like years. He was smiling, not the tired, polite kind, but a real one. It reached his eyes, made the corners crinkle. "What?" he asked when he caught me staring. "Nothing," I said, reaching for the syrup. "Just happy to see you smile." And I meant it. After everything, the grief, the fights, the fear, he deserved to be happy. And so did I. I was eating again. The nightmares weren't every night anymore. I still missed my mom, but the ache wasn't as sharp. Later that day, I walked into the kitchen and found Caleb and Jenna talking in hushed voices over a stack of bills. They froze when I entered, glancing at each other. "What's going on?" I asked, already suspicious. Jenna answered first. "We were just talking about the future." "What about it?" Caleb hesitated. "Jenna's lease is up next month." "We were thinking maybe she could move in, help with rent." I looked between them, reading what they weren't saying. This wasn't just about bills. "Are you two back together?" "We're figuring things out," Caleb said gently, his eyes soft when they met hers. "But we wanted to check with you first. You come first, always." I pretended to think, letting them squirm for a moment. Then I said, "Well, she does make better pancakes than you." Relief flooded Caleb's face as he laughed. "So that's a yes?" I nodded, and he pulled me into a hug. Over his shoulder, Jenna mouthed, "Thank you." I smiled back. That night, I lay in bed, listening to their quiet voices drifting from the living room. After all we'd been through, the accident, the grief, Craig's revenge, it finally felt like we were healing. The next morning, the pancakes were back. So was the coffee. And so was that familiar look between Caleb and Jenna when I walked in, like I'd interrupted something. Again. "You two look suspicious," I teased, grabbing a plate. "Just boring grown-up talk," Caleb said, trying to sound casual. I wasn't buying it, but I let it go. As we ate, I caught Caleb watching me again, his usual look of quiet relief every time I finished a meal. After breakfast, Jenna kissed his cheek and gave my shoulder a squeeze before heading to work. The second the door closed, I turned to him. "Okay, spill. What's really going on?" Caleb sighed. "Craig's parents called yesterday." My stomach dropped. "What did they want?" "To warn us," he said, rubbing his temples. "Apparently Craig's been making threats again, nothing specific, just rambling about revenge. They're worried he might try something." I rolled my eyes. "What's he gonna do? His parents cut him off. He's got no proof." "He's got nothing." "I know," Caleb said. "But still, just be careful. Don't go anywhere alone for now, okay?" I nodded. I wasn't really scared. Craig seemed powerless now, but I was wrong. A week later, I was at my locker when Zoe rushed up to me, pale and breathless. "Olivia, have you seen the school website?" she whispered. My chest tightened. "No, why?" She pulled out her phone. Someone had posted on the school's anonymous confessions page. It was a photo of me, clearly taken during my lowest point, looking painfully thin. The caption read, "This is what happens when your guardian is too busy with his new girlfriend to notice you're starving. Save Olivia. Report abuse." I felt like I'd been hit in the gut. Students were already whispering, glancing at their phones, then at me. The post had hundreds of comments, some concerned, others full of wild assumptions. Someone had even tagged the local news. I locked myself in the bathroom, trying not to panic. My phone was blowing up with messages. I turned it off. By third period, the counselor had called me in. Ms. Reynolds looked genuinely worried. "I've seen the post," she said softly. "We're taking it very seriously." "It's not true," I said quickly. "My brother's not hurting me. Someone's doing this to punish us." "Craig?" she asked. I nodded. "He's been trying to ruin us ever since Caleb kicked him out." She frowned. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof?" "No," I said quietly. "Not anymore. He destroyed my phone the night I tried to record him." The rest of the day was unbearable. The stares, the whispers, the pity from teachers. Someone even said they'd always felt something was off about me. By the time Caleb picked me up, I was barely holding it together. I showed him the post in the car, his jaw clenched, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "I'm going to call him." "No," I said firmly. "That's what he wants. He wants you to lose it so they can use it against you." Caleb took a breath, forced himself to calm down. "You're right. We have to be smart." When we got home, Jenna was already waiting. She'd seen the post too. Apparently, it had spread beyond the school, onto other platforms. She pulled me into a hug while Caleb paced, already making phone calls. And this time, we weren't going to wait for Craig to strike again. After the phone call, Caleb turned to Jenna and me with a heavy sigh. "We need to take legal action," Jenna said firmly. "This isn't just bullying. This is targeted harassment, and it's defamation against a minor." Caleb nodded. "Mark says we might be able to file for a restraining order, but we need proof it was Craig." I groaned. "Which we don't have, because he smashed my phone." Jenna paused, thoughtful. "Maybe not directly, but what about the IP address? If the post came from his device, the school would never release that kind of info to us," Caleb said, frustrated. "No," she replied, "but they might to the police." The next day, we went to the station and filed an official harassment report. At first, the officer seemed doubtful, but once we laid out the entire timeline, anonymous tips, fake family messages, Caleb losing his job, and now this post, his tone changed. "We'll request the IP info from the school," he said, jotting things down quickly. "In the meantime, document everything. Every message, every new post, anything unusual." Later that afternoon, a new social worker arrived. Mrs. Patel. Unlike the others, she didn't seem easily impressed. Her eyes scanned everything, sharp and calculating. She interviewed me privately. Her questions were pointed and personal, about my eating, my feelings toward Caleb and Jenna, and whether I truly felt safe. I love having Jenna here, I told her honestly. She's like the big sister I never had. And she makes Caleb happy, which makes me happy. She nodded, taking notes. And the weight loss? I hesitated, then took a deep breath. Craig manipulated me, I said. He made me feel like I was a problem, like I didn't deserve space. I stopped eating to cope. I pulled out the food diary I'd been keeping, something my therapist suggested. I'm getting better. I'm eating again. You can check with my doctor if you want. Mrs. Patel gave a small, almost invisible nod. Her final question caught me off guard. If you could live anywhere right now, where would it be? I didn't hesitate. Right here, with Caleb and Jenna. They're my family. When she left, we all collapsed onto the couch, drained. That wasn't so bad, Jenna said, trying to be positive. It wasn't good either, Caleb muttered. She's definitely filing a report. We're going to have more meetings, more questions. I leaned against him. We'll get through it. We always do. The next day at school, things were slightly better. The principal had removed the post and gave a general announcement about the consequences of cyberbullying, without naming me, thankfully. But people still whispered. During lunch, I sat alone, until Tyler, my chemistry partner, slid into the seat across from me. Hey, he said awkwardly. You doing okay? I shrugged. Been better. He nodded slowly. I don't believe that post, by the way. My dad tried the same kind of stuff when my parents divorced. Said terrible things about my mom just to get custody. People can be awful. I felt a lump in my throat. Thanks, Tyler. He pushed a chocolate pudding cup across the table. You want this? I'm not really a chocolate guy. It was such a small gesture, but it nearly brought me to tears. For the first time in days, I didn't feel totally alone. When I got home, Caleb and Jenna were waiting for me, with news. The police had traced the post's IP address. It hadn't come from Craig's apartment or his phone. It came from a nearby coffee shop. He'd probably used public Wi-Fi to avoid detection. So we have nothing, I said, sinking. Not quite, Jenna said, eyes lighting up. That coffee shop has cameras. And 2 days later, we got the call. The security footage showed Craig, clear as day, sitting at a table with his laptop open at the exact time the post was made. It wasn't definitive on its own, but paired with everything else, it was enough. The police brought him in for questioning. He denied everything, of course. But then they got a warrant, searched his place, and found a folder on his laptop labeled Olivia. Inside were multiple photos taken of me without my knowledge, including the one used in the post. There were also saved drafts of emails to my school and child services. That was all it took. The restraining order was granted immediately, and Craig was charged with harassment and cyberstalking of a minor. Serious charges. His parents, horrified by what he'd done, hired a top-tier lawyer to protect their image. He got a deal. Probation, mandatory therapy, and most importantly, a court order to stay at least 500 feet away from me and Caleb at all times. Mrs. Patel returned for one final visit, not to question, but to close the case. This time she seemed different, more relaxed. She even smiled as she flipped through her notes. I'm recommending we officially close this file, she told Caleb. There's no sign of neglect, no evidence of abuse. In fact, I'm genuinely impressed by how you've handled everything and protected your sister through all of this. Caleb looked like he might cry. Thank you, he whispered. She gave one last warning before leaving. Those relatives may still try something down the road, but with everything you've documented, their claims won't be taken seriously. When the door closed behind her, the three of us celebrated. With ice cream and a movie marathon. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly safe. The weight of Craig's threats, the fear, the constant pressure, it was finally gone. School slowly got better too. The whispers faded, especially after the principal made a general statement about false reports and legal consequences. He didn't name names, but people got the message. Tyler started eating lunch with me more regularly, and eventually a few of his friends joined. I wasn't exactly popular, but I wasn't a walking rumor anymore either. Caleb got his old job back with a small raise and a real apology. He kept the weekend delivery gig for extra money. But things finally felt manageable. About a month later, I came home from a late study session to find Caleb and Jenna sitting at the kitchen table again, looking serious. My heart dropped. What now? I asked, dropping my bag. Nothing bad, Caleb said quickly. We just wanted to talk to you. I sat down cautiously. We've been thinking, he began, glancing at Jenna. The lease on this apartment is almost up, and we've been looking at houses. Houses? I blinked. We can't afford a house. Actually, Jenna chimed in with a smile, my parents offered to help with a down payment, as an early wedding gift. Wedding? I looked down and noticed the ring on her finger for the first time. Caleb grinned. I proposed last night. We're thinking next summer. I squealed and threw my arms around them both. That's amazing, Caleb chuckled. So, you're okay with it? The wedding? The house? Are you kidding? I've been rooting for you two since the day you broke up. Jenna pulled out her tablet and showed me listings they'd saved. Small houses with yards and sunlight-filled kitchens. We wanted you to help pick, she said, since this will be your home too, at least until college. That moment hit me hard. Even in their next chapter, they were still thinking of me, including me. I'd love that, I said, fighting back the lump in my throat. That weekend, we went house hunting. The third one we toured felt different. It wasn't the biggest or the most modern, but it had a cozy charm, a wide backyard, and a kitchen that made Jenna's eyes shine. As we stood in the empty living room, Caleb turned to me. What do you think? I looked around, trying to picture it filled with our things. Our life. I love it, I said honestly. Me too, Jenna added quietly. It already feels like home, Caleb nodded, his voice soft. Then let's make an offer. 2 months later, we moved in. Our old apartment furniture looked a little lost in the bigger space, but Jenna's parents donated their couch and dining table, and we slowly filled in the gaps. I painted my room navy blue and strung up fairy lights across the ceiling. For the first time ever, I had a space that felt entirely mine. On moving day, as we collapsed onto the floor surrounded by boxes, Caleb handed me a small wrapped package. What's this? I asked. Open it, he said, smiling. Inside was a framed photo of Mom, one I'd never seen before. She looked young, full of joy, laughing at something out of frame. I found it in one of her old albums, Caleb said. Thought you might want it in your room. I hugged him tightly, tears threatening. Thank you. That night, I set the photo on my nightstand and lay back, listening to the quiet creaks and sighs of our new home. I could hear Caleb and Jenna talking softly downstairs, their laughter drifting up to me. Outside my window, the stars were brighter than I'd ever seen them in the city, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt at peace. We'd survived the worst, the grief, the fear, the betrayal, and somehow we'd built something new from it, something strong, something real. I thought about that day, all those years ago, when Caleb sold his prized baseball glove to buy me a bike. This is what brothers are for, he told me. He was right. But what he gave me was more than just brotherly love. He gave me family, a future, a home, and that made all the difference.